James Meadway recently argued that modern monetary theory, MMT, offers nothing to help us understand or respond to the climate crisis. Now, this is a bold claim, particularly considering the growing number of progressive economists who find it valuable. Now, does a modern school of economic theory truly ignore one of humanity's greatest challenges? Of course not. James's criticisms were detailed on his Macrodose podcast. From his socials, I had an impression that he had given up on MMT a long time ago and had closed his mind to the usefulness of the MMT lens. Still, I've never seen any point in engaging on those issues with James or anyone else who misunderstands MMT on X. So it's great to have an opportunity to respond to James's detailed criticism of MMT. Now, I interviewed James on Scot onomics in March 2020. During the conversation, James acknowledged a fundamental MMT concept. Does the government tax to spend?
No, not really. That doesn't mean that it doesn't need to levy taxes or that taxes don't matter. But if the government wants to spend, it can just spend. There's often confusion about this, and some people get very excited when they realise the government can just sort of spend money without thinking through what the next round of consequences from that are. But at least as a sort of formal statement about how the world is, the government doesn't need to tax to spend.
So as James says, governments don't need to tax to spend. Now, he can see this, so it's puzzling that he dismissed MMT's usefulness in addressing systemic issues like the climate crisis. Now, James divides his critique into two areas: academic theory and real-world application. Now, for many, the practical implications of MMT matter most, especially in urgent global challenges like climate change. So I'm going to concentrate on that part on this video and address the academic aspect in another video. Now, James claims that MMT has nothing to say about the climate crisis. However, a closer look reveals that this simply isn't true. Now, the Finding the Money film, one of the most recent and highest profile MMT explainers, places climate policy at the forefront of its analysis.
MMT doesn't solve all our problems. Being able to create money doesn't solve all our problems, but finding the money is often the least important challenge. The real challenge revolves around how we can organize our collective resources to allow humanity and the rest of the living world to thrive within planetary boundaries.
The final segment of the film is dedicated to how MMT can drive climate action. Now, proeminent MMT economists like Fidel Cabood actively shape global climate finance policy. Now, Cabood advises the Tunisian delegation at COP29, demonstrating MMT's direct engagement with climate finance, a clear counter to James's assertion. Now, in 2022, Torrens University in Australia launched a master's program combining MMT and ecological economics. This integration highlights how MMT provides crucial insights for addressing ecological and climate challenges. Now, academic voices like Jason Hickel and Colleen Schneider have further connected MMT to climate policy through their paper, How to Pay for Saving the World: Modern Monetary Theory for a Degrowth Transition. Their work outlines how MMT helps us understand the transformative changes needed to combat climate change without relying on traditional fiscal constraints. Durkheim's book, A Simple Guide to the Monetary System, dedicates entire chapters to MMT's application in the Green New Deal, climate justice, and an economic Bill of Rights. Economist Eric Tamoin discusses how MMT can help governments achieve emissions targets without traditional budgetary constraints. Professor Steve Keen, one of the world's leading heterodox climate economists, uses the MMT lens in his work. Professor Richard Murphy, who co-wrote the original Green New Deal in the UK, also sees the clear connection between climate policies and MMT. Mariana Mazzucato and Kate Raworth regularly cite the work of leading MMT economist Stephanie Kelton. The deputy leader of the English and Wales Green Party, Zach Polanski, who joined me at UCL to discuss the Finding the Money film, told me, "We know that the government lens of balancing the books is a false one." I can add that MMT lens proves this. Now, if James isn't seeing the connection between MMT and the climate crisis, it's only because he stopped looking. Beyond climate, James critiques MMT's relevance to three other key areas: the USA's diminishing power, the state's growing role, and the waning authority of finance. Now, each of these areas is actually a strength of MMT scholarship. It's undeniable that MMT economists deeply understand the US monetary system, particularly the power dynamics surrounding the dollar's global hegemony. They analyse how monetary sovereignty enables governments to wield power independent of financial markets. Understanding the role of the state is another area where MMT excels. By illustrating that governments with monetary sovereignty can set policies independent of tax revenue or borrowing, MMT empowers states to take decisive action on climate. But we need to return to that central claim. Now, after finishing my science masters in the green economy, I studied MMT in the hope of better understanding how we fight the causes of the climate crisis. Am I misguided? Is MMT useless when analysing climate economics? Well, let's just look at a few core parts of MMT to show how understanding where the power lies within the creation of money strengthens a progressive response to the climate crisis. Now, MMT offers three critical insights for climate policy in sovereign currency nations like the US, UK, and Japan. Number one, interest rates as a policy choice. Now, Lonergan and Sawyers argue and supercharge me that low interest rates provide a window for the global north to invest in net zero. They claim that once rates rise, the opportunity closes. However, MMT reveals that interest rates are a government policy choice. Even at 5%, governments can still choose to invest in climate initiatives. The market doesn't dictate these rates, it's governments that set them. Number two, taxes don't fund spending. Now, one of the most empowering insights of MMT is its assertion that taxes are not needed to fund government spending. Now, this dismantles the myth that we must heavily tax the wealthy before we can afford climate action. Instead, we need to tax the wealthy to reduce their planet-harming consumption and their power, not to pay for expenditures. Number three, governments don't need to borrow. In monetary sovereign nation, governments create their own currency. This means they are not beholden to financial markets for funding. They can direct resources toward climate action without being constrained by borrowing fears or deficit and default concerns. Now, this has real-world implications, so let's break this down. Suppose the government refrains from investing in climate initiatives due to rising interest rates. This is something that James would critique. Well, MMT's perspective reveals that such hesitation is a policy choice, not an economic necessity. Governments can and should choose to invest in climate adaptation and mitigation, not only when rates are low. Similarly, MMT debunked the notion that tax revenue is a prerequisite for climate action. Wealthy individuals and corporations often use their financial influence to resist higher taxes by threatening to withdraw from an economy. Now, MMT shows this to be an empty threat. Governments can fund climate policies through currency issuance, making taxing the wealthy more about curbing consumption and inequality than about generating revenue. Now, lastly, by understanding the monetary sovereign governments don't need to borrow, we can see a profound shift in the power dynamics. This empowers governments to take bold action without the constraints imposed by financial markets. Now, MMT's insights extend beyond monetary sovereign countries. Fidel Cabood's work illustrates how MMT principles can support countries in the global south in achieving food, energy, and technological sovereignty. Now, this is crucial for climate adaptation and resilience. MMT equips us with the tools to challenge power structures and take decisive climate action. Now, while it doesn't provide all of the answers, it offers a powerful lens to reframe economic constraints and empower bold policy solutions. Now, James Meadway's dismissal of MMT overlooks its substantial contributions to understanding and addressing the climate crisis. From reshaping fiscal policy to empowering governments, MMT offers a robust framework for progressive climate action. It should not be hastily rejected by failing to consider how the discipline has evolved. Those engaged in the economics of the climate crisis should explore its potential to drive meaningful change.